That's a job for general manager George Paton. It's got Hackett gone. Wilson did not pan out in year one. On top of that, 4-11, as I mentioned there, want to put you in Paton's shoes. I know they're not good, but what happens from here?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, Brandon. This is going to take a lot longer than Jiffy Lube. Jiffy Lube is much faster than what it's going to take to fix the Broncos. There's a number of factors. You have to look at this in the historical context a little bit too. Before, George Paton is in place right now as the general manager. But as you look at this franchise, remember, this franchise made a lot of moves under the old ownership, right? You go back, George Paton was hired by the old owner. Vic Fangio was with him for a year, was then fired. They hired Nathaniel Hackett. He's not hired by the new ownership. He's now fired. The only new employee that they have of significance in the leadership structure is their new president, Damani Leach. And I bring that up because of this. They signed Russell Wilson before the new ownership took over. So there's a lot of dynamics involved with this organization right now where when you have new ownership that stepped in here in August, they can step away from anything and everything. They are currently married to a number of people that they didn't sign up for. So when you look at this again, that the new ownership is here, they can make a number of changes. And those changes are going to have to be made. And I don't mean just in the football operation. They're going to be taking place throughout the organization, through the business operation. And people say, well, that's the business. That has nothing to do with George Paton or Russell Wilson. And that's not necessarily true. There will be people coming into the business operation who are close to ownership, and they're going to be likely people that have worked with the family before they took over the Broncos, and they will have opinions. They'll have strong opinions. So this is going to be an organization that is in transition and change over the next several years. So before you, or as you're getting to a lot of the football stuff, you're going to have to take care of a lot of the business stuff. And that, again, like I said, will impact this. The other big thing that we know is staring us right in the eye here is the Russell Wilson situation. But if you go back and you look at the timing of that signing, this organization was up for sale. They were trying to make the old ownership was trying to make the organization look as palatable as possible. So they went out and signed Russell Wilson, who a lot of people felt or traded for him, and then gave him the contract extension. Some people thought he was long in the tooth, but this on the surface made the organization look a little bit more attractive. But now they are saddled and truly burdened with an enormous contract that is bad news. So before we get to the football stuff, before we get to the hiring of the head coach, there's all of this stuff that has to be worked through, Brandon.
You mentioned there are plenty of dominoes there in Denver, that new ownership. But if you're Paton or the CEO, Greg Penner, in terms of looking for that next head coach, are you in a rush here? Are you waiting after the postseason? Of course, teams will be playing off season. What's your play here?
Brandon, I think some of the new rules force you to be in a certain space with people that are currently under employment in the National Football League. But there's a number of different ways. I don't think you need to be in a rush, but I also don't think you can slow play it. It's somewhere in the middle. But I think there's a number of coaches, because of some relationships that exist in the Broncos organization, that are going to be interesting. The first one that I think of is David Shaw, who worked at Stanford before Jim Harbaugh, who has a relationship with Condoleezza Rice, who's part of the new ownership group at the Broncos. To me, David has coached in the National Football League as an assistant. He was a head coach for a very long time and did a terrific job. I've spent a lot of time with David over the years. He is a winner. He has got the right temperament. He's incredibly smart. And again, he does know the league. We see him every year around the draft time. He knows the players in this league. So to me, David Shaw is a curious choice, possibly. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Jim Harbaugh, but I think it is important to note that he does have a relationship also with Condoleezza Rice. The big name that everyone is talking about is possibly Sean Payton. And there's a couple of things with the current quarterback situation that may play into favor with Sean Payton, other things that go against it. I'm sure Sean Payton would love to walk into a situation where there's a good veteran quarterback. We just don't know how good Russell Wilson is now, and we don't know how that relationship would go. To me, one of the other veteran names that you think about is Jim Caldwell, who has not coached in the NFL for a couple of years, but is a guy who should be a head coach in the NFL right now and has had a terrific career. When you look at some of the other people from a defensive side, I'm thinking about someone like Dan Quinn, who has a pre-existing relationship with Russell Wilson from their Seattle days. Dan could come in if he brings the right coordinator, offensive coordinator. He takes over the defense. Dan has some interesting background. Obviously, I worked with him in Atlanta. I know that he's a good head coach, and is going to be a better head coach the second time. The other defensive coach that I would consider and think about is DeMeco Ryans, who's currently the defensive coordinator out with the San Francisco 49ers.
So plenty of guys to look at between now and, of course, into the offseason for Denver. They have options, as you mentioned there, offensively and defensive minded when it comes to that next HC. When it comes to the QB, you kind of touched on it a little bit. They let Russ cook this year, and let's just say he burned down the kitchen this season. But when it comes to that contract, over 48 annually, and we know how big it is, 245. What's the biggest problem here after looking at that deal after year one?
Well, the biggest problem is the entire contract. I don't know if it's the entire contract. There's not one part that you can look at that makes it more palatable or attractive or workable in any way. When you look at this right now, if he were to be cut right now in this moment, it's $107 million of dead money sitting against the cap. Post June 1 designation, there's going to be $77 million of dead money sitting in 2023, and then another $30 million in 2024. This is a contract that is going to be an albatross. There's nothing they can do. They can't trade. They can't cut. The only thing there's nothing that can be done. You know, the idea that Russ would ever give some of that guaranteed money back, that's not going to happen. But again, as you look back at this, one of the problems here in sorting this out, it's not looking to place blame, but who did this contract and why was this contract done? You know, was it the former head coach, Nathaniel Hackett? Was it George Payton? Was it the previous ownership who, again, were they putting Russell Wilson in place because, again, that made the organization look a little bit more attractive to the new owners? The bottom line is this: they've got to live with it for at least one more year, and even if they got rid of it in another year, it's going to be hanging around their necks, and it's not going to be pretty, Brandon.
It's funny to see that list of the guaranteed money. The top three guys will not be in the postseason. As you look at the bottom three, including Aaron Rodgers, they still have a shot. Scott Piolo, appreciate your time. Join us there from the sauna, I believe, here on HQ. Appreciate it, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your holiday there. Don't forget, of course, the crew on the Inside the NFL. James Brown and the fellas breaking out everything as we get closer to Week 17 and, of course, the end of the season. Can catch them streaming on Tuesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on Paramount+.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.